Hi, everyone, and very welcome to yet another Captain Speaking podcast. And just to make sure that everyone knows about it, if you are watching this on YouTube, you can also listen to this podcast wherever you find your podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other programs. So this is actually an audio podcast. You're just very, very lucky to see our beautiful faces here watching it on YouTube. How are you, Ben?
I'm very good. How are you? How's your week been?
So it's been good. I've come back from the second part of my vacation. I came
Very
back on
nice.
Tuesday, and it's Friday now when we're recording this. So I'm starting to just get kind of back into the gist of things. But you know how it is. Like
It's always hard, isn't it? It's hard.
it takes a little bit of a while to kind of wind up. You know.
Yeah, it does. It does. I find it's hard when you've come back off a bit of leave. Even if you love what you do, just getting that pace back. It's a bit like the training we said the other day, where you have that breakaway. Coming back is hard.
Yeah, talking about training, like we were discussing how it is to be exercising when you're above 40 in the previous episode, and I have the worst case of tennis elbow now.
Oh,
It's painful. I've never had that.
I haven't.
For those of you who doesn't know what that is, it's kind of like the tendons in the elbow that is inflamed, and obviously you do everything with the elbow. So especially when you just grabbing a carton of milk from the fridge hurts, and it does not go away. I've read up a little bit on it, and it's just like rest it until
Yeah.
it's gone. But
I hate that advice as well. I hate that because it's like, oh man, because you just want to crack on, don't you?
it's so frustrating when you finally started to get into the habit of going to the gym and getting exercise. Now you can do that still. Like there's plenty of stuff that you can do without stressing the elbow. But still, it's just super, super annoying.
Was that CrossFit, do you think?
No.
No.
That's me being stubborn. That's me going home. Like for some reason, my CrossFit instructor, he has never had me working out. The lower part of my arm, those muscles that are like below the elbow. We haven't had any specific exercise for that. So I thought it was a good idea when I came home. Like, I want to try some exercises for that. So I started using some dumbbells and kind of like lifting them up and down, which was great. And it really, really worked for that lower muscle. The problem is that that's what supports these tendons. So because that muscle probably became a little bit overworked or something, it now transferred a lot of the strain over to the tendon, and that probably what's caused it.
Yeah.
So it was me, as you would expect when you don't know what you're doing. But yeah, no, apart from that, it's actually great to be back. I have to say, like you get back into normal routines with how you eat, how you sleep.
Yeah.
I know, you're still flying, so that's always a struggle when you're in this business. But for me, that is now creating full time, I can actually set that, which is great.
Yeah, it sounds good. I'm on a bit of leave as well, funny enough. So I'm only a few days in. So it's kind of in that wind down period, where you're still kind of a bit up there, and it's just that come down now.
I love that. That's the best part of the vacation for me, when you feel like you're slowly slowing down and you still have quite a bit in front of you, so that you know it's just going to get chiller from here.
Yeah. So looking forward to the next kind of week or two ahead of me, which would be nice. It's been a busy 6 months. So, but yeah, went out yesterday, took the kids out to the London Dungeons. I don't know if you've heard of that in London.
I've been there actually. It's very cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's pretty traumatic. I hadn't been there since a kid, and they've actually moved location now. It's just underneath the London Eye, and my kids are older now. But going in there, it's pretty gruesome actually. It's pretty traumatic. I'm glad we live now, not back in like the 1600s or whenever it was. That wasn't fun.
No. I'd say that there's basically no part of life that was better than now.
Nope, not at all.
No, they have a similar thing, not as famous, but a similar thing in, I think it's Carcassonne in southern France, which is pretty close to where I am, for an exhibit on the Spanish Inquisition, and
okay.
the kind of torture tools that they used to do what they thought was the religious work that needed to be done. It is gruesome. Like you cannot, it's just you cannot fathom that people did that to each other.
You wonder what's wrong with people, don't you? You think, how can you even think this stuff up? But anyway, we did it. We all had nightmares last night, and we're back now, ready.
That's one way of kind of warming up for the vacation.
Yeah, keep the stressors going. Yeah.
Traumatize the children a little bit. That's we're getting into it.
But anyway, that was my leave so far.
Yeah, well, that's so far it sounds good. Any plans for what's happening going forward?
Yeah, going down to my parents. My parents live down on the south coast, which is a lovely part of the world, south of England, kind of opposite the Isle of Wight. So we're down there, taking the kids down there. So it's a great catch up with the family, just chill for a bit. Do a bit of sailing, bit of mountain biking. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Awesome. Find yourself a good book. I found a good book, and it's like reading a normal book, nothing on a tablet, just a book. It's really underrated.
It is. It is. It was. I was in Waterstones in Piccadilly Circus yesterday, looking for a book. So great minds.
Yeah, as it often tends to be.
Yeah.
So one thing that caught my eye the other day, though, that I wanted to ask you about, Ben, is obviously I'm following you on Instagram, Airline Pilot Performance. Everyone should be checking that out if you're not already. And there was a reel that you put out, which was on a 747-800 from UPS that landed somewhere. Do you remember where it was?
Yeah. It was the one that landed in the storm in Taipei, and it had the nacelle strike. Is that the one you're thinking of? Yeah.
That is indeed the one, and it looked pretty dramatic. As in, it looked like the aircraft was coming in with some very, very strong right crosswind. Right.
Yeah.
So a crosswind, for those of you who don't know, is when the wind is coming from a different direction than the landing runway. So you're coming with wind from the right in this case, and it can be quite tricky because landing an aircraft is in crosswind is pretty much like getting a boat into harbor in a river. Right.
Yeah.
You have to put the nose of the aircraft into the wind in order to align with the runway and keep the runway direction. And if that's really, really gusty, so the wind is constantly changing speed and direction, it becomes pretty tricky. But this was something out of the ordinary. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, and it was there. You could see them coming in because the angle was from behind the aircraft, so you can see them kind of crabbing, which is where they're doing what Petter was saying, aiming into wind. So they're pointing one way but going another. As they should be, and then the wind is changing quite dramatically, and they're getting kind of gusted around. And as the aircraft this was their third approach as well, so they'd already done 2 approaches, gone around because it wasn't safe, come back around for a third approach. We'll talk about the wisdom of that in a moment, but they then came down, and just before they touched down, they got a huge gust of wind from the side. They then corrected for that with some aileron by the looks of it. And the problem with something like a 747 is the huge wingspan, and with the engines hanging underneath the wing a long way out, as soon as you put any significant amount of roll very close to the runway, that wing is going to dip and it's going to touch whatever's closest to the ground, which happens to be the outboard engine, which will be engine number 4. And it because it was nighttime, it was pretty spectacular. You see it hit the ground, and inevitably you get this plume of sparks that comes up.
It looked like a Hollywood production. It looked like a big fireball coming out of it.
It really did. It really did. Needless to say, they got it on the ground after that. The main wheels touched. They kind of decrabbed, got the aircraft lined up, and they landed. And thankfully, I saw some post damage videos and footage from the following day in daylight. It actually wasn't. Oh yeah, there was a scuff underneath the engine, a bit of a black mark, but that seemed to be the extent of it. Nothing too serious.
So no one was injured. There was nothing out. I mean, obviously the aircraft is grounded. I'm guessing that they're going to have to do some structural checks on the pylon and maybe even the wing, depending on how much pressure there was upwards.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that because, like you said, allegedly this was on their third approach. So they would have come in 2 times before. The winds would have been too strong, or something else would have caused them to go around, which we do when the aircraft is not stabilized and we feel that it's not perfectly safe to continue. But now they came in for a third time, and that is a little bit interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is not written in stone, but industry best practice, certainly what we do, and I know from speaking to colleagues in other airlines, is that we have what we call like a 2 approach rule. So if we fly 2 approaches and we do 2 weather-related go-arounds, the weather has to improve by a factor of 2. It has to get twice as good, effectively, before you can fly a third approach, which from my experience means you're probably not going to fly a third approach.
No, I mean that's the thing. So in this case, they would have to have half as much wind.
Yeah, Yeah, the wind would have to drop by half. Maybe if the cloud base was too low for them to see the runway, which it wasn't the case here, but if that was the reason for their go around, the cloud base, maybe rather than being 150 feet, would have to double to 300 feet and so on, or the visibility would have to double. It's there to prevent that kind of press-on-itis, that carry-on-itis, where people can just keep going and after the same goal. And we try and mitigate that, and it's all part of our threat and error management philosophy.
Which is something that I want to talk a lot more about. But before we get to that, when you mentioned threats and error management, it's actually a brilliant segue into our sponsor of this episode, which is NordVPN. And the one thing that I wanted to point out is their Threat Protection Pro feature that is part of their cybersecurity toolbox that comes with it when you sign up for NordVPN, which is really, really great today, as we're finding more and more really advanced cybersecurity threats out there, phishing attempts, even legitimate websites that you think look like any other news website or sales website might be there to do nefarious things to you. And the NordVPN Threat Protection Pro is really great because you just activate it and it works in the background even when the VPN is not being used. So you don't need a VPN or the VPN to be working as you're doing it. It's just there working as kind of your invisible lifeguard in the background, which is great.
It is. And it's, from my previous experience, one of the real benefits for me when you're traveling is being able to access geo-locked content. If I want to watch Formula One, I want to watch rugby, and I'm in another country, I can't watch BBC One or I can't watch Channel 4. But by activating the VPN, I can shift myself virtually to the UK. I can watch the UK content. It's super fast, which is amazing. And it unlocks this ability.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. And in my family, I am obviously the one that has the NordVPN product that I have the code. But you can use it up to 10 different devices on the same license, which means that my entire family can use it on their devices when they're out traveling. So they often call me and ask like, "Oh, what was the login again?" here? Which is super great. And if you're listening to this or if you're watching this on YouTube, we have a special deal for you. If you go to nordvpn.com/captain, that's nordvpn.com/captain, not captains, then you will get 4 extra months for free when you sign up for the 2-year deal, which is super, super good. So there's going to be a link here in the description or the QR code on the screen, or you can just go to that address if you're listening to this on the podcast.
Yeah. And I just had to go just because I've obviously got it, and I just wanted to see how long it took to do. And it was super quick. I managed to do it in less than 30 seconds. So give it a go. See how long it takes and let us know.
Yeah, so you signed it up in less than 30 seconds.
Less than 30 seconds.
That's pretty nifty. And with that, we'll back to threat and error management. So what do we actually mean by threat and error management? Because it's kind of like a lofty, woofy little thing to say. You have to understand what it is.
Yeah, threat and error management is something that's woven through our operations, isn't it? In any decent airline, threat and error management is woven through the operation, and it's there to ultimately prevent this press-on-itis or this get-home-itis and be able to anticipate threats that are coming our way so that when we see them, we can recognize them for what we are because we've anticipated it. And then once we can recognize them, we can then mitigate them using strategies that we should have already briefed at the very beginning. So it's there to prevent this.
Yeah, so that still sounds a little bit whiffy-woffy if you don't understand how. I mean, for any pilot that's out there, this is going to sound obvious. But I would say for you who's listening to this and are not pilots, this is the difference between taking your car and going straight out into a snowstorm and sitting at home before and thinking, is this a good idea to go out because there's a snowstorm? And if I'm going to actually do this, which roads are we going to take? Which roads will be cleared? Where do I have my winter tires on? And is there any chance that this might, the storm might die down in an hour? In that case, should I go then instead?
Yeah, that's perfect. Exactly. It's thinking ahead, because I think it's so easy in life just to carry on doing, particularly if you've done that lots of times before. You've done the same journey, the same thing, and it's just worked. That builds that confirmation bias or that kind of complacency that this previous experience means it's going to happen again, which obviously there's no link. Just because it worked once doesn't mean it's going to happen again. And I think I actually learned this very early on in my career, where I had an event as a very new flying instructor that taught me a very valuable lesson. I was very lucky to get away. Actually, reason I was thinking about this was because of a question that was asked last week. Do you remember when someone said, "Have we ever been scared in an aircraft?"
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And generally, no, I don't think scared is the wrong word, but I was thinking about it afterwards and going, you know what? The closest I've come to being scared in an aircraft was actually, 20 odd years ago as a new flying instructor. And it was because of this kind of press-on-itis and a bit of complacency built in there as well. And to kind of if I kind of give you the background to that. So before, as you know, I worked for KLM UK, and part of the sponsorship deal was that you have to be a flying instructor to gain 1,000 hours before you join the airline. So I was a flying instructor at Biggin Hill. I got my FI rating, and we would go and take PPLs and private pilot license and night ratings and whatever else it might be. But on a busy Saturday in the summer, one of the most common things that we would do were trial lessons. Same thing that you and I did when we were 14. We'd rock up for our very first, be super eager, and you go and do your first trial lesson. So loved ones would buy this for their family, and
which is awesome, by the way. You should buy this. If you know someone that's interested in aviation, a trial lessons is one thing that you should buy them.
Oh, it's life-changing for you and me, wasn't it? So but it's great. It's a great thing to do. And I used to love it because the PPL training was great. You get to know the people and you get to take them along their journey towards getting a license. But the good thing about doing a trial lesson is you're getting that enthusiasm every time. People are so excited and so keen to be flying themselves for the very, very first time. And we would do potentially on a Saturday afternoon in the summer, like this time of year, I might do 5 of these in a day. We might start at 8:30 in the morning, finish at 6:30, and we would do 5 of them. And we would typically do the same thing. So we'd do a brief, we'd get airborne, we fly then about half an hour east, 20 minutes east to a little grass airfield called Rochester. Land there, cup of tea, bit of cake, bit of chit chat, back to Biggin Hill, bit of a debrief. The whole thing would take about 2 hours, I guess.
That's 5 cups of coffee in a day there.
And 5 slices of cake. I'll tell you, it was lucky I was 21 with a super fast metabolism, because I'd been about clinically obese probably by the time I did it otherwise. And it's one of those things that initially kind of sounds a bit monotonous, but I used to love it because every flight was different. You might have people that were super keen, like you and I were, that we wanted to get as much hands-on as we possibly could, and we give them as much as we could. And other people would just want to take pictures, and you kind of suss this out very, very early on. And you'd meet some amazing people, everything from super enthusiastic kids to 80-year-olds. I remember one of the great ones I had actually for this lesson was an 80-year-old guy. I can't remember his exact age, he was in his 80s. And the last time he flew was in a Spitfire during World War II.
No.
Out of Biggin Hill. I know.
Out of Biggin Hill as well?
Out of Biggin Hill. And after the war, he just never flew again.
Can you imagine?
I know. And his family brought him here, and they took him. He was quite fit, and he was very fit and able. And I thought, wow, what? Getting airborne out of Biggin Hill in a propeller aircraft. And the last time he did that was in a Spitfire during the Second World War. It was almost too much to get your head around. Yeah, it was such a privilege. Oh, yeah. Such a privilege. Yeah, it was incredible. And he still had it. He was throwing this Cessna around like there was no tomorrow, bless him. It was incredible.
Which in a Cessna might actually be the case if you're throwing it around too hard.
Yeah. He was kind of reminiscing, and I was like, it was a real pinch me moment. But that was kind of the spectrum of people that you would meet doing these kind of trial lessons. And anyway, I was doing these all day. It was a beautiful day. It was a very hot days. And typically you would try and keep the same aircraft all day because you could kind of look after it, look after the oil levels, look after the fuel levels. You know that it had been looked after, rather than giving it to maybe a student that smashed it around the circuit and you just take it over. I knew that the state of this aircraft. So I would try and wangle it. I had the same aircraft. Anyway, I did 4 of them. And on my last one of the day, very frustratingly for me, they changed aircraft, and we would do it. We had a range of aircraft. The one I was doing it majorly on that day was a Grumman AA5 Cheetah, which was a little sports car, kind of 4-seat piston engine, only 100 horsepower. They all kind of had the same engines, but it had like a sliding canopy, and it used to handle quite nicely. I used to quite like it. And they changed me onto this older PA28 for the last one of the day. So anyway, we did the briefing. We got airborne. We flew to Rochester. We had out my 5th cup of coffee and slice of cake that day. And we got back in, taxied out. And it's a grass runway in Rochester. And I did the same thing that I'd done all day, taxied out. And did the pre-flight checks, did the power checks and everything, started accelerating down the runway. Now on the runway in question, it's relatively short, and B, at the end of the runway, there's a line, I think they're poplar trees, line of trees at the end of the runway, which is far from ideal, which means if you're coming from the other way, that it's kind of got like a displaced threshold. You've got to land further into the runway because of these trees. Anyway, that was kind of your view. I added the thrust and the acceleration was, well, less than dramatic. Let's put it that way. We kind of started trundling down this grass runway, and grass runways are typically a bit more draggy anyway. Imagine pushing a shopping trolley on a car park and then pushing it on grass. It's gonna need more effort. So typically the aircraft don't perform as well. Plus it's hot. So hot days, aircraft don't perform as well. The air's less dense and the acceleration isn't going to be quite as good. So anyway, we start trundling down the runway here. And I get halfway down the runway. I'm looking at my airspeed needle and it's slowly starting to come alive, starting to show an increase. And I'm looking at these trees and I'm looking at the airspeed and I'm looking how far down the runway I am. And I'm thinking, actually, maybe this isn't such a good idea. So I rejected my first ever rejected takeoff and thought, okay, we'll bring it to a stop. Told the guy next to me, said, oh yeah, it's the end of the day. It's still very hot. What we're going to do is a different type of takeoff. So taxied back, did the power checks, checked everything was okay. And I thought I'll do a short field takeoff this time. But it was never in my mind did it think I'm not going to do this. It was very much, oh yeah, it's last thing of the day, going to go home, blah, blah, blah. So we do something called a short field takeoff, which is where you would take a bit of flap, which enables you to get airborne a bit slower and use less runway. I thought I'd go use all the runway, line up right at the end of the runway. I'd apply full power against the brakes and use everything I had in my kind of resource. I also thought about getting into ground effect, which is where you can get airborne a bit earlier and then kind of just leave it there about a foot off the ground, let it accelerate out of the draggy grass. Anyway, so here we go. Full power against the brakes, brakes off again. Felt like someone was pushing us. It was a very slow acceleration, but started trundling down the runway again. And I'm looking at these trees and I'm looking at my airspeed needle again, slowly starting to show an acceleration. And we needed to get to 55 knots, I think it was, for a short field takeoff instead of 65. Yeah. And anyway, we start bouncing down this grass runway and I'm looking at it now. And you get to that point where you think you're almost, the speed's at like 45, but I'm now over halfway down this runway. I'm looking at these trees and you got that split second of, nah, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And
the killer.
Yeah, the killer. And I got to the point now, I thought actually, and as soon as you make that decision now, it's now kind of too late for me to stop. And as soon as it was too late for me to stop, I kind of wanted to stop. I was like, oh man, I should have stopped. But I was kind of committed at this point. I could tell that this was going to be tight either way. So I thought, right, I'm going to hop it into the air. So I kind of just pulled back and kind of got it into the air, which wasn't a wise thing to do, and just left it. And the stall warner was kind of me, which is telling you that you're just on the limit of lift here. And then it slowly started accelerating. I'm looking at these trees now at the end of the runway. And there was this few seconds, it felt like an eternity, but it must have been a couple of seconds where there's a reality check of like, oh crap, I might actually go into the top of these trees. And there was this horrible kind of surge, that kind of gut in your feeling tummy of, oh. And it was super hot and we were climbing away and I'm looking at this and I'm teetering this aircraft on the edge of the stall here. You can, in a light aircraft, you have a little stall warner, which is basically a little metal flap on the leading edge of the wing that when the wind gets underneath it, your angle is too steep and it will lift up the flap, make a contact, and it makes a little electronic noise. Yeah, exactly. It's like me. And so I'm kind of climbing away on this and I'm thinking, oh my God, yeah, I'm looking at this and there's a few seconds of, oh crap. And anyway, as I get higher, I guess the headwind must have started to increase slightly and I can see my rate of climb increasing and I clear these trees and Rochester's on top of a hill and I managed just to lower the nose, gain the airspeed, get rid of the flap and climb away. But I remember just that few seconds after, I'm pumping out sweat. But I look at the guy next to me because anyone who knew about flying would be like, geez, that was close. And he was busy just snapping away out the window. He was loving it. He was like, he had no idea.
He's going to contact you after this. Yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, whoever you are. Yeah. You have no idea how close we came. But it was a real wake-up call for me as a brand new instructor. You know, as an instructor, I think the danger there is, I'd done that 4 times that day in exactly the same conditions. No problem at all. But now I've been changed into this older aircraft. It was heavier. Didn't have this good. The engine was old. It was still super hot, but I never really considered it. It was just, I'm going to go. It's going to be fine. But it taught me a very valuable lesson. And I was in those hours where we later kind of called the killing zone, where you've got, which sounds brutal, but it kind of is, where you've got experience, and you think you're experienced in that small pond where you might have 300 hours as a light aircraft pilot. Bearing in mind, you might come out of a PPL with 50 hours. If you meet someone with 300, you're like, wow. I was kind of there. And you think that, I'm cool, I'm good, I know what I'm doing. And that kind of complacency and that press on itis nearly ended up in a pretty nasty incident. And
this is, first of all, the hair is standing up on my arm when I'm listening to it, because it is really, for people listening to that, some people, if you don't have experience with this, you might think, well, he cleared it, so it couldn't have been that bad. But in aviation, it's all about margins. In aviation, it's all about making sure that you never even close, like the sweat should never start to come out. And I think it's this is actually it's a perfect example of why there's such a big difference between general aviation and the airlines, right? Because you were at that little field, you were having cake, having coffee, looking at the windsock and think, well, this looks pretty okay. It's a little bit warm, but fine. Now in the airline, obviously, first of all, we would have calculated a very specific V1 point.
Yeah.
Right. That, before this, we reject, after this, we go. And that is based on all of the performance data that you that you don't really, you have access to the POH, the pilot's operating handbook in a small, but it's on a day-to-day basis. You don't sit and go into the graphs and check your performance exactly like you do a weight and balance if you're doing a long trip. But if you're doing just, you're two people, there's no baggage, anything, you're inside of the of the limit. But that would never happen on an airliner, because on an airliner, you do it for exactly the weight you have and exactly the temperature you have for every single takeoff you do.
Correct.
Just so you never end up in a situation like that.
No. But it changed me from that point onwards.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting as well to hear you talk about the experience zone, like the death zone.
Yeah.
It's funny because it actually happens in the airlines as well to a certain point, where this is also where it's great to have a captain and a first officer. Because we know, for example, as line training captains, that we've been flying with people with all sorts of experience, all the way down from 200 hours when they start their career, potentially. I know in the US that sounds crazy, but in Europe we do. You go straight out of school, out of an integrated training program, into do the type rating, and then straight into the right seat of a Boeing 737, for example, or an Airbus A320. And when you fly with those, sure, you have to be on your guard because they don't have any experience, and you are there as a line training captain to teach them. This is how you do it. But that also means that you are constantly vigilant.
Yeah.
You sit and you know that this person might over rotate, so you're guarding with you have that famous left thumb up, and you kind of just like, in case they pull too hard, you can stop it, and you're doing that for every phase of the flight. When they start to do their descent planning, you know exactly when you have to tell them, like, actually now you have to act. But then as the experience grows, so kind of lowers the vigilance of the captain, especially if you're not a line trainer. If you're just a normal captain, you'll see that the experience. You'll ask, obviously, in the briefing in the morning, first officer, okay, so how much experience do you have? They come with 3 stripes, and they're like, I have 1,500 hours. You got, all right, they've been around for a year at least, probably a year and a half or so. You can relax a little bit, right? So then the captain is relaxing. On the other hand, the first officer has now had a year and a half, and hopefully they've never really had anything happening to them, right? They haven't had any bad technical malfunctions. You can go whole career without a really bad technical malfunction today. But they've also never really taken a bad decision or gotten into a hot and high situation where they needed to get out of. So they've had kind of smooth runnings, which means that their knowledge in themselves and their beliefs in themselves, their self-confidence is sky high. Like they're 1,500 hours, 3 stripes, great. Nothing has ever happened to me. So that you have that exactly the same thing you're talking about, that you have the mismatch between now a really relaxed captain and a quite overconfident first officer. Potentially, this is not for everyone, but it does happen. And at some point, something will happen, right? And it's really interesting because when you're going into assessing people for command, you have to judge where on this spectrum they are. And generally speaking, at around 1,500 to 2,000 hours, they have now tried a little bit too hard. They're too slick. They wait a little bit too long to take flaps one, or they come in a little bit high and they think it's fine because we have a little bit of headwind or whatever, and they end up in a position where they have to do a go around because of a bad decision.
Yeah,
right. They're hot and high. They think they're going to make it. They come down to the minimums. Yeah. Or down to the 500s, and it's like, no, you're not stabilized, go around.
Yeah.
And after that, you can see this clear change. Their confidence starts dropping, right?
Yeah.
And then it drops and drops and drops until when it's time for their potential command upgrade, which in a really fast expanding airline can be as early as 3,000 hours.
Yeah.
Right? And before then, they even start to look into, like, what's your attitude like? How's your training going? To see if you're, and I remember when you come to that point and you ask them, if you ask them, like, so how do you think you're ready for command? And the pilots who said, actually, I'm not sure. They are the best ones.
Yeah,
they are the ones that are really, and the ones that are like, absolutely, they're like,
let's see.
You probably have not thought this through.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so true, and you can see the different in its personalities and experience as well. And I think the reason, and that's what experience is, isn't it? It's seeing more. It's having seen more. I mean, you and I are more experienced than someone coming out of flight school because we potentially made more mistakes. We've learned from those mistakes. I always may say mistakes are never bad as long as you learn from them.
No.
And you get away with it. But yeah, as long as you don't waste them.
No,
and
exactly.
And that's what it does. It changes when you have these kind of mistakes where you get away with it. And you go, geez, I need to really sit myself down and have a think about this now. What would I do differently if I did this now, tomorrow? And that kind of leads back into that threat and error management, where we have this mindset where we treat every scenario as unique. So even though we're coming out of, say, London Stansted today in a 737-800, and I did it yesterday, every departure is different. There could be different threats today. There might be none yesterday. But today there might be a stronger crosswind. It might be a wet runway. There might be some work in progress, which means the runway's a bit shorter. Maybe there's low visibility. So you've got to look at each individual one and have a mindset of what's changed. What could catch us out today?
That's super important, because I remember when I was doing line checks on this, and you'd see people doing threat and management, and they would do something which is playing just basically they're doing a threat and error management briefing, but they're not taking it seriously, right? They're just doing mouth service to get it done, right? They know that it's supposed to be done, they do it, but you listen to it and you realize that these people are not really looking at the threats. They're just blabbering out generic threats at the airport. That's not what this is about.
Nope.
This is about, you can come in and say, listen, today it's a cavalcade day. There's almost no traffic. There's no additional threats that I can see. Can you? And that's perfectly valid threat and error management briefing.
Yeah.
But there's also the next day, like you said, it was like, oof, there are thunderstorms around. It's loads of traffic. There are holding patterns into Stansted. We might end up in a situation where we don't have enough fuel to continue to our destination. What's our alternate? If we end up with the CB coming in on final, how close can that get before we have to stop the approach? Like, it can go from 5 seconds to 5 minutes of briefing, realistically.
And the best threat and error management, I find, and what I try and teach, is when it's woven throughout any kind of briefing you want to do. And when we're mentioning threats, and this goes for anything in life, really, when you're identifying things that could catch you out today, you've also got to bring in, what are you going to do about it when you recognize that? Because otherwise you're only doing half of the job. So it's all well and good going, oh yeah, well, the threats today, it's a crosswind and a wet runway. Great. Okay, fine. What are we going to do about that?
That's the management part of threat and error management. Yeah,
that's it. I mean, I had one, well, it was literally a few days ago. I was getting airborne, we came into somewhere, and it was typical kind of strange weather phenomenon around a bit of terrain where it was quite a strong tailwind. We had like a 15-knot tailwind all the way down the approach until about 300 feet. and then it changed into an abrupt headwind. So the landing, the wind on the ground was a headwind, but all the way down, it was a tailwind. And we kind of configured, we could see this on our nav display. You can see a little wind arrow and a wind vector tells you how fast the wind is blowing. So we could see we would have a tailwind. So we configured early and so on. But on the departure, we were looking at threat and error management. And one of the things we identified was potentially an abrupt tailwind on takeoff once we got airborne, which means your airspeed is going to potentially go from 20 knots less than your airspeed could reduce by a significant amount very close to the ground. So to mitigate that, we said rather than going to a reduced takeoff thrust, because we have multiple thrust settings we can use for takeoff, and our performance would allow us to go quite reduced, we elected to go to a full thrust takeoff. So we had the energy to climb through any kind of tailwind that we may have had. And that was different than the day before. So it's identifying anything that could have the mindset, what could catch us out today? And what am I going to do about it if I see it?
Yeah, and it's interesting because what you're just describing is basically every day in Girona, my home base. Like you come in from the Pyrenees and there's a really strong katabatic wind coming in during the winter, especially. That's a fall wind, cold air that's falling down out towards the sea, and it brings with us higher winds aloft as well. So you'd come in with something crazy, 35, 40, over 45 knots of tailwind coming down in the descent, and you know from the weather report from the airport that you have a 5-knot headwind on the ground. So this means that you know that at some point during this descent, the wind is going to change almost 50 knots.
Yeah.
And you don't, like 50 knots, that's what? It's 80, 90 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
So the problem with that is that we, like the aircraft, if there's a strong, if this doesn't happen gradually, because if it happened gradually, you can kind of compensate for it, bring a little bit of thrust down, let the aircraft kind of transition into this new wind. But if it happens abruptly, which tends to be the case in Girona, because there's lots of inversions and stuff there that you have loads of tailwind, and then it just turns into either zero wind or headwind.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that all of a sudden you are going to have a speed increase of up to 50 knots. And those of you who have been following our course, we do the virtual 737 course. You can go to virtual737course.com to check it out, by the way. You know that the 737 have maximum speeds for their flap settings.
Yeah.
Right. So when we go down an approach, we start with flaps 1, we take flaps 5, then we normally take gear down flaps 15, and then you go down to landing flaps, which is flaps 30 or flaps 40 normally. If that change happens when you're in your landing configuration, so let's say that this wind shift happens at 500 feet, you might come into a situation where you overspeed the flap. Right, the speed goes up so quickly that you overspeed the flaps. The flap does something called a flap blowback, which is they retract to protect themselves from the stresses, and you're definitely not in a position to land from that. No. So we would do these briefings, and if you're used to Girona, you knew about it, you didn't have to go too much into it. But if you didn't, you'd have to do a really thorough brief, and you have to think about, for example, with flaps 30, you are going to have a bigger margin, right? So with flaps 40, the margin between your fly speed, the speed that you're supposed to fly, and that flap blowback is pretty small.
Yeah.
But with flap 30, it's much bigger.
Yeah.
And you also knew that you have to sit there, and when you see it happening, you have to start to reduce a little bit of thrust, but not too much. You don't want to go back to idle at low altitude. So not too much. And then as you go through that transition layer, you have to add thrust pretty quickly, because now if you're sitting with idle, because of that speed change, all of a sudden when that speed has stabilized itself, you don't have any engine thrust anymore. So the speed will just drop off with landing flaps. Yeah. So now you have to add thrust as you're going through this. This is really, really complicated.
Yeah, yeah, and all the while, the aircraft, you're now changing, it's out of trim, isn't it? As you add thrust, reduce thrust, the nose is feeling heavier or lighter, and there's a lot going on at the same time.
Yeah, and in some cases, if this happened at 500 feet, you just couldn't land. It was just unlandable, right? And you kind of knew it's better to wait. But if this happened at 1,000 feet and you knew about this and you were prepared for it and you were really experienced with it, you could still keep it stabilized. But super hard. And without a proper briefing about this, the pilot monitoring, if they didn't know what you were about to do, it would just look like all of a sudden a wind shear. It is effectively a wind shear, but it's something that you can get through because it's not It doesn't come out of a CB cell, a thunderstorm cell. This is something that you can plan for. But it's really interesting.
It is, and the benefit of briefing this threat and error management is it takes away that surprise element, doesn't it? Because a lot of the time, if you weren't expecting this, your brain is now trying to compute, wait, what's going on here, which adds to the workload. Whereas if you're ready for it, you're like, oh yeah, I know this is going to happen. You do what you say you were going to do in the brief, and hopefully it works.
And this is something that definitely can be transferred onto any other industry.
For sure.
There's no question about that, because when we work in a two-man or like a two-person, I should say, kind of environment in the cockpit. And one of the reasons we do this is just like you point out, so that the other person know what's going to happen. Both of you know, but the other one will not be surprised at what you do. Right? You're briefing them about what you're going to do, what the threats might be, and how you're going to mitigate it, so that it will not come as a surprise. This can be done for anything. This can be done for a business deal.
Yeah.
You can sit down with your sales group and you can say, okay, what kind of threats are we expecting here? Does the customer have other alternatives that they might go for? Are there competitors that might have similar products that these people might go for? If they bring that up, or even if they don't bring it up, how should we tackle it? Should we preempt it by offering to match whatever other deal they might have on the table? Is there anything else that we know about their particular operation that makes our product more suitable for them?
Yeah.
And by briefing the entire team before you go into a customer, customer meeting, for example, you can now be fully together on how this is going to be solved.
Yeah.
And everyone knows what to say, everyone knows how to deal with it, and you will come off from the customer's perspective as really well prepared.
Yeah. And this is all built on a foundation from a business perspective of not resting on yesterday's success. As soon as you start to get complacent in that sense, oh yeah, the business is booming, we're doing super well. As soon as you rest on that, everyone else is evolving. The whole industry is evolving around you, and you're not recognizing that as a threat. So therefore, you're not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And you'll get lost.
There's some great examples of that, actually.
Yeah. Nokia. I think Nokia. I was reading an article about Nokia the other day and how they were as we were like kids, young adults. Everyone had a Nokia phone, didn't they? It was if you didn't have a Nokia, they had also. I remember like the banana one, the kind of like the Matrix one that was in the Matrix. I think it was.
Yep.
It was all but they owned the market pretty much, and yet because they didn't see the evolution of smartphones coming, or poo-pooed it as such, they didn't evolve. They didn't see that threat, and therefore the industry changed around them, and they got dropped. And now they're pretty much nothing. They failed, and that was the result of that.
Yep, exactly. So it goes for any time. And another thing that you brought up, actually, that I think is super important, and I think people maybe don't realize the importance of, is, like you said, after that horrible event or a horrible experience that you had, you sat down and thought, okay, so how do I make sure that this does not happen again? Right? This is self-evaluation.
Yeah.
Right? The self-critique. And self-critique, without self-critique, you will never evolve. You will never learn. You will never get better. So this is one of the things that I appreciate the most in a training environment, that you work with a couple of students, right? And they might be strong or they might be weaker in certain areas, but the most important aspect of their personality is going to be, can they actually evaluate this themselves? So when you get into a briefing, we do something called facilitated briefing. Right? Facilitation is basically you asking them, okay, so how did you feel that this went? This exercise, was there anything that you could have done differently, or were you happy with how it was? It's an art form, and students generally hate it because it requires that they would just want to be told, did I do it well or not? But the fact is that the reason that you do facilitation is that you need to know, does this person realize at what level they were? Most of the cases I came out and I asked, okay, so how did that go? And they're like, yep, pretty good. And I was like, yeah, that was really good, actually. It was super good. Let's talk about how or why that was good. But there are also these inevitable situations where someone has not done something well. And what you want when you get out from a training session that you've had this is you want the student to kind of lower their head a little bit and say, listen, I was not at all happy with how that non-precision approach was done. I was way behind the aircraft. It's because I was unsure about the call-outs or at the configuration points. I clearly have not studied as much as I should have before the session. You get a student like that, you're never really worried.
No.
It's like, okay, yeah, good. That's exactly what happened. I'm glad that you saw it as well. How are you going to deal with that? Well, I'm going to study this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, take the paper tiger.
Yeah.
That's a kind of like a mock-up of a cockpit and do the dry fly, as we say, the approach a couple of times, and then we'll see.
Yeah. Perfect. And a lot of it is for our job as instructors during this facilitated debrief is to get to that root cause, is to try and work out exactly where that all began to go wrong. So you might get someone that really messes up, for example, that non-precision approach, and they go, I really wasn't happy with that. And then by kind of asking questions, go, well, why? Where did it start to? What kind of led to the go around? Oh, I was unstable at the gate. So in other words, I didn't get all of my speed back under control. I didn't get all my flaps out and didn't get all the landing checks done by, say, 500 feet. So you had to go around. So it wasn't a successful approach. Okay, great. But why? Why did you not meet the landing gate? Oh, it's because I got turned in earlier, or maybe there was a tailwind on the approach. Okay, so why didn't you, what could we have done earlier to do that? Why did you lead into that high energy approach? Oh, it's because we were late doing getting the cabin secure, or we were late doing the briefing. And they actually stem that rather than a poorly flown approach, which might be application of procedures or flight path manual, it was actually stemmed in workload management 10 minutes ago.
Yeah. What Ben is saying now are actual competencies.
Yes.
It's core competencies that we use to evaluate. Right? So when he says, what did you say? It's
workload management or flight path management manual. Sorry, yeah. This is my work brain kicking in.
Very, very technical flight instructor terms that we're using. But yeah, we do. And it's actually quite interesting as well. When we evaluate people, and this can also be applied to any business really, is that we have very defined root causes that a certain competency needs to be explained in a very specific way. Because if not, it's impossible for us as instructors to tell a pilot what to improve on.
Yeah.
So like Ben is saying, in this case, it had probably nothing to do with this pilot's ability to fly the approach. It was about planning, which was about application of procedures, because they didn't take flaps at 10 miles, for example. Or they accepted a turn into approach when they were too high, where they could have just asked for an extra vector.
Yeah, which would be situation awareness, maybe.
Which is situation awareness.
Yeah.
So this is what we do. We sit. We kind of normally we would when you sit in the sim, and you've seen this a couple of times, you start to scribble down. Okay.
Yeah.
You see when they make the first mistake, and you write that down.
Yeah.
Right. So they accepted the turn in.
Yeah.
Right. Not good. That was a trap that the instructor had put in just to see whether or not the situational awareness was there. They accepted that. All right. This is now the beginning, and then it evolves, and then they can either sort it out, which is great. Then it's like, oof, very impressive flight path management. Or they let it roll on, and it becomes worse and worse and worse. But then it's where it's really interesting to see whether or not they understand that.
Yeah.
But again, without self-critique, without sitting down and asking yourself, that I was not happy with how that went, but why? What could I have done differently? You don't go anywhere. And if you are one of those people who sits down and do this, because again, you can do this in any job that you have. Like after something that didn't go well, a meeting, a review by your boss or whatever. If you're one of those people who sits down and say, that's because he's an idiot. He doesn't understand me.
Yeah.
You are not learning, right? You might be right. I don't know your boss. It might be correct. However, there is likely something in there that you could do differently in order to get a different outcome. Because if your boss is an idiot and he is not liking you, or she is not liking you, whatever, well, that's likely not going to change by you just thinking that this person is an idiot. It might change by you changing his or her perception of you, though.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah, and the way you deal with them and manage them.
Yeah, because it's a management issue in both certain kind of ways of the word. But so I think that that's something that we could all probably be better at. Instead of blaming stuff at others, just
Yeah, I hate the blame mentality. I really hate that where it's everybody else's fault, which is rare in aviation, I think. I've only seen it very, very occasionally in briefings where I've seen that. But and I think it is a skill, this self-critique. I know as a 21-year-old me instructor, I was super hard on myself that day. I was so disappointed in myself that I got myself into that I really beat myself up over it to the point it almost became non-beneficial. You, you go a bit too far.
yeah.
But again, I kind of learned from that. The layers go deep because you look at that, but I look back at that as I got over it and go, yeah, that was counterproductive. Yes, I did something wrong. It was a mistake. Yes, I need to look at it and evaluate it and critique it, but not to the point that you beat yourself up. And this is something I've shared with students because you've no doubt seen it with cadets where they're super. I've seen cadets in tears where they're so hard on themselves, but that produces nothing good.
No, and in fact, you're absolutely right. So that's the ugly shadow effect of self-critique. Because self-critique also, I've had that, but I've sat down with a very skilled cadet, like super skilled, but they've gotten to that position by pressuring themselves constantly, right, from all directions. That no matter how much they study, it's never enough. No matter how well they perform, it's never enough. You always can be a little bit better, and that's not true. The fact is that you're on a learning curve. It's very clear when we do type ratings, because type rating is when you learn how to fly the Boeing 737, for example. So you have your certificates, but now you need to learn this particular type.
Yeah.
And it's generally around 2 months of length, including some ground school in the beginning, what we call a fixed-based session, a couple of simulator sessions where you go through how to do the procedures, and then it's the full flight, which is actual movement of the simulator, where it's typically handling and failure management. So in those 2 months, you as a cadet will have a really, really sharply increasing learning curve. Like you learn from one day to another, you learn so much, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that at one point or another during this 2 months, you are going to have what we call a learning plateau.
Yeah.
Those learning plateaus happens at different points. Some people don't have them, but most people do. And they can happen during the fixed space. It can happen during the full flight. And what it is basically, instead of having that really sharp learning curve, you get better and better and understand more and more. You just have a few sessions where there's not much improvement. And generally speaking, it's your brain catching up.
Yeah.
It's like your brain is now consolidating all of that knowledge that you've gotten in a really short period of time, and you might do a mistake, and then you get that little thing jumping on your shoulder saying like, oh no, you can't do that mistake again, and then you overthink it, and then you do a bad landing and you do another bad landing.
Yeah.
And it happens in line training as well.
It does.
And the key here is to get them to understand that this is normal. We were going to plow through this. Line training, maybe you'll do 5 bad landings in a row now. We're going to analyze each one of them. But the thing here is not to overthink it and not to punish yourself.
Which is so hard because I think as an individual, when you're young and you're keen, I would get, like I said in the previous episode when we spoke about racing, I'm so competitive, but mainly with myself. And I used to find it so hard if something didn't go perfect. And it won't go perfect because you're learning. And one of the bits of advice I've given to students so many times when they come out of a line training day or a sim session and it didn't go so well, but you can tell they've put the effort in, it's just the way it goes, is that if you were perfect, if you could do it now, Petra and I would be out of job. You wouldn't need an instructor. Yeah. The whole point of having an instructor is so that we can correct you and steer you in the right direction. And mistakes inevitably will happen because if you didn't make mistakes, then you'd be a perfect pilot from the day you came out the womb.
Yeah, and after 20 years of flying, we still make mistakes every single day.
Absolutely.
That's just the way it is.
It's practice makes progress, not perfection. So it's just getting that progress over a bigger period of time rather than instantaneous.
We should put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, practice makes
progress, not perfect. That is actually a very, very good thing. I love that. But you're absolutely right, and it's also interesting actually when we're talking about this how you change with age when it comes to this. This I think is super important, especially since a lot of the people that we talk about here are like 20-year-olds. People that come straight out of the flight training. They've started really early. They don't really have any life experience yet. And life teaches you, if there's one thing that life teaches you, is that everything is very relative.
Yeah.
And that you have to put things into proper perspective.
Yeah.
Things are probably never as good as you thought or as bad as you thought.
Perspective is key.
Yeah. And you see that with older cadets actually that's coming in. We discussed that the other day, that they tend to have a slower start but then take off quicker.
Yeah.
I noticed it myself, because remember I told in the previous episode that I took the my motorcycle license. So I did a training for that. It included 4 sessions of training with a heavy motorcycle, and then it was into the exam. Now, in my life, I've never failed at a driving exam or a pilot, a check flight or anything like that. And I came in and I was not as prepared as I should have been. Like that, I needed more training. But I've never failed anything like this. I came in and I super failed my first one, as in like really bad. And I came out, I was so disappointed in myself. I was like, how come that I couldn't, like, I failed in the slalom. I came into the slalom in the wrong angle, which meant that I didn't have the angle to make the next turn properly.
Yeah.
And then that's it. You can't, you can't get through it. So it was just a bad start, basically, of it. But this was super interesting, because I know that if that would have happened when I was in my 20s, that would have killed me, right? But I went away from there, and I didn't even break a sweat. And I felt like I was disappointed. For sure, I was disappointed. But life goes on.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, okay, so I didn't do this. What do I do? How do I make sure that I make it the next time?
Yeah.
And my answer to that was, I need 2 more sessions of training where I know where my mistake was. So I'll do 2 more sessions of training. I'll pay for that. And also I noticed that the exam was in the morning, right? And I noticed when I did my trainings that the first couple of minutes on the bike, I was a little bit stiff, and I didn't really have the confidence with it. I didn't lean the way I should. So I thought the best way to do this is I'll do these 2 exercises, see that I can do it properly.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to ask a friend of mine, and we're going to go out with his motorcycle, and we're going to go out to a parking lot. And I'm going to do, half an hour of just maneuvering with the motorcycle before I go into the exam, because that's what I need.
Nice.
And I went and did the exam, passed it without a problem.
Perfect.
Yeah. It is a good example. Like, you're not immortal, you'll make mistakes.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with them?
And I think what you've described there is exactly how I feel. And it's the advice I try and give to people that I'm training, that I can see are struggling a little bit with it, is to have that self-critique, but to keep it as objective as possible. Try and take the subjectivity away from it, the emotion, which can be super hard.
Yeah.
But sit back. And the way I sell it is, look, you're a professional now. You've got to look at this from a professional perspective, not as an emotional being. So we are, yes, that didn't go so well. Why did it not go so well? What are we going to do to fix it? Then apply that.
Correct.
That's it.
That's
and
it.
then you get the benefit of it.
Yeah.
So for any of you 20-year-olds or anyone out there thinking that can really kind of identify with that kind of emotion, try to keep it as objective as you possibly can.
Absolutely. And that's... we always end up being pretty deep towards the end.
I know.
Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
Like last one is the last one, but I think we gave the best advice of our lives during the last 15 minutes. It's wonderful. Now we're up to an hour, so I'm going to rattle off at least one of the questions. I love when you're sending in your questions, by the way, and quite a few of them are so thoughtful and so long that we will actually use them to create these podcasts.
Yeah.
Right. We'll have one that we were supposed to talk about today, but we won't have time now. No. So we'll do that on the next podcast instead, which is about, how do you actually get a job when you've done your training, which is a great question, right? And requires a lot of answering, which we can't do now. But I'll see if I can find one here. Let's see. This is about simulator training as well. We can take a quick one. We can take a quick stab at how we choose stuff in the simulator, and then we'll incorporate that in another podcast as well. But this is okay. So this is from Romy, and he says, "Hi, Petra and Ben. I have a question for you that I'd love to hear you talk about in the podcast, and it's about your simulator training. You seem to do it pretty regularly. How do you choose what to do in the sim? Does your company tell you what to train? Do you ever get to choose what you want to practice? Like, you're feeling a bit rusty in a certain skill, can you do that? Or can you replicate specific flights in the sim? Like if you want to try a landing in the Hudson, like US Airways 1549, can you load that into the sim and have the same bird strike? I would love to know more about what this or how this sim training works.
That's a great question.
That's a great. Again, we could probably spend an hour.
Oh, yeah, easy. Yeah.
But just we'll divide this into parts. So you are currently doing sim training. I am not. So how do you do if you're going in for a recurrent simulated training day? How are the exercises chosen?
Yeah. So the answer is kind of yes and no, but typically we don't make stuff up anymore. It's very prescribed as to what we do, and it's all geared up around competencies and trying to achieve certain training objectives that we have to cover every 6 months. So it's very prescribed and it's very well thought out. There are normally multiple options that we can give. So we do have a choice of which option we give, but each option is very well thought out to achieve a certain outcome.
Yeah. So that's pretty, like, I just want to highlight that the reason that it is like that is because of fairness and because of effective, like we need to get effective training that is on a broad basis applicable to everyone in an airline. So we have to make sure that you know, these competencies are what we are focusing on in this particular session. We need to make sure that everyone gets the best possible training. And you get that by making sure that we standardize the exercises and then look for how people react to the exercises.
Correct.
Rather than just, let's see what happens if we pull this one.
Yeah,
you know,
gone
which
are
is
those
what,
days.
I mean, that happened back in the day.
Used to, yeah.
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 So this is actually really, really good. I love the way that that's done. I just want to emphasize as well that when it comes to recurrent training, generally speaking, you cannot train every single part of an airline's syllabi in one session. So we have 2 training sessions per year, and then we have 2 checks per year. So every 6 months, there's a combination of a training day and a check day, or a combined training and check day, depending on which part of the season it is.
Yes.
And the way that it's done is that, let's say we have our flight manual and it has a certain number of chapters. It'll be things like navigation, it'll be warning systems, it'll be power plant, it'll be flight controls, and so on. These are divided into 3 parts, or is it 6 parts actually?
It's 6, yeah.
It's 6 parts. It's 6 parts over a 3-year cycle.
That's it. Yeah.
So we, in our airline anyway, that's the way we do it. You go through a certain part of the manual in one session, and then you focus your training, all of your training scenarios and stuff around that, and then you go through it. So over 3 years, you're kind of refreshing your technical training constantly, all the time.
Yeah.
And that's the way that the exercises are chosen.
Yeah. So thankfully, gone are the days where the examiner can just carte blanche, do what they like. That was carnage, and it wasn't fair. So
see, I did that once. Right, I flew with an examiner who I was in with the line training captain. I was a first officer at the point, but I was a synthetic flight instructor. So I was a first officer, but a simulator instructor. And I flew with a line training captain, and I flew with an examiner who did kind of loosely follow what the examination pattern should be, but added on things onto each exercise. So if you did something successfully, he would be adding on until you couldn't do it anymore.
Oh dear,
right?
dear.
So what happened was that you for example, I would be doing the exercise was supposed to be a single engine go around, right? But I did a single engine go around, and then as part of the single engine go around, all of a sudden the captain was incapacitated. So now it was a single engine go around with captain's incapacitation. And then 10 seconds later, when that was sorted out, there was all of a sudden a mountain that turned out. So now it was a single engine go around with a terrain escape maneuver and incapacitation. So it was just added on until you inevitably did something really bad. This doesn't work anymore. And after the session, because I was an instructor at the time, I took, because we got out, both me and the captain were unsure if we had passed. Right? We were like, did we pass that? I have no idea. And we went out into the debriefing, and the instructor, the examiner, he was like, "Oh, that's great, really good guys, very good in this and all of these competencies and yada yada yada. It was splendid job." So I took him aside afterwards and I asked, like, "Listen, is this why you want me to prepare my student for, because I was doing the training day, which was before the check back in the day. And he was like, no. The way I do it, right, is I do follow the training syllabi. But if someone is good, I just add on. And then I add on until it doesn't work anymore. And depending on where that happens, I can grade them.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought that, I was like, it was funny. It was funny. But if that happens to the wrong person, and obviously, so basically what that meant was that if someone was weak, they would never have gotten that. It would just have been the standard checked profile, and that's it. But if someone is good, you would never come out of that feeling good.
Well, thankfully those days are gone. But
but that was long. That was like 20, more than 20, almost 25 years ago. That never happens now.
Yeah. Oh,
it's kind of funny though. But
that's traumatic.
Before we finish, I just want to that part about whether or not we can load certain scenarios. So theoretically you could, but there's no preset scenarios like that. It's not like we can choose do the Hudson, but you can do similar things. So
Which
you can
we do,
which we do. So you can load in bird strike when you hit 1,500 feet, for example, on departure. And then from that, depending on which runway we're using, whatever, you're going to get very similar type of options available for the pilots. So that we do.
Yeah, and again, it's all very pre-programmed. So it will be enter a bird strike at, say, 1,500 feet, and at 1,800 feet, we have a severe damage on engine number 1, and then severe damage on engine number 2, and then it flames out, and then they're left with trying to clean that up. So, but again, it's very, very well practiced and thought out before it gets anywhere near line pilots.
Question though, do you use the presets for the sim, or do you do it manually?
No, I put them in.
Yeah, me too.
You do?
So you put in the presets as this will happen at 1,500 feet.
Oh yes. If there's multiple ones, like when we've got like a bird strike in each engine and a severe damage at each engine, I will preset those.
Yes, because that's impossible.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like engine failure on takeoff, for example,
no, I generally kind of press the button.
Yeah, me too. Just to explain what we mean here is that when you're in a simulator as an instructor, you have the cockpit, the perfect replica of the cockpit where the pilots are sitting with everything. You can even close the kind of circuit breaker panels behind them, so they really feel like they're sitting in the cockpit, and the visuals are amazing now. And then as an instructor, you're sitting on a chair a little bit higher up, and it's kind of like it looks like Star Wars. Like you're sitting on a throne that you can move forth and back. And on that throne, you also have at least 2 different screens. And on those screens, you have everything that you can possibly come up with. Everything from any failure of any system, any change in weather, change of time, date, how quickly the aircraft moves. You can even speed up time, All of this you can do. And you can also set presets, like Ben said. We can preset that when this aircraft gets to 200 feet, there will be a bird strike to the right engine. 200 feet later, there will be a bird strike to the left engine that will cause an engine severe damage. But you can also go in and you can have like engine failure activate, and you just sit with your kind of finger hovering over that button. And I like that because it's really like you're sitting there, you kind of lean forward in and you look at them, both of them. And then you have your hand, and you see that, okay, so this is a V1. They call V1 engine failure. And now you're in, and you're just watching how they react.
Yeah.
To it.
Yeah. Typically the same. Yeah.
Cool. Right. That's almost an hour and 10 minutes. I hope you have enjoyed it. Again, make sure that you check this out on all of your podcasts networks as well, so Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube or wherever you are, make sure that you check out our sponsor, nordvpn.com/captain. We're really, really happy that we have them because NordVPN and we have sponsors that support us really enables us to do this, to sit here and talk to you for an hour without anything. So check them out if you are in need of a great VPN. And I don't know, do you want to say anything to finish up?
No? Let us know how quickly you can sign up.
Good. Until next week, have an absolutely fantastic day, and we'll see you then.
Take care, everyone. Bye.